Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, we're going to finish up our discussion on flow and maybe start a new topic. We'll see how this last little section goes. But after last call, I received an email from one of you asking questions about the heartline. And is the heartline where flow really occurs? And you know, could we do a little bit of a review? So I thought, yeah, I'm happy to do that. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of a look at this. So you see a change grid. You know from our call last time around that they said flow occurs in this wedge right here. So if we divide this into 8 wedges, the wedge that would be out grid is where flow would start. And we at least took great issue with a great deal of all that, but nevertheless, that's just to orient you to what's going on. So if flow is going to be at its best, flow would be traveling along the horizontal line that emanates from the power point in the center and goes all the way out grid, uniting identical coordinate pairs. So 7, 7, 8, 8, 9, 9, 10, 10. If there was a line there, that would be where flow would be at its best. Now, because the flow little wedge extends wider than a straight line, they're also saying that a certain amount of flow can be experienced if you are, in our lingo, slightly above, up grid, or slightly below, down grid of that line. So you guys all oriented to what we're looking at? Yeah.
Yes.
So someone said, well, how does this map to the heart line? So let's leave this for a second and take a look at the heart line. So the heart line is this horizontal green line that bisects power into an upper and lower kind of hemisphere. And we would say that whenever the coordinate pairs are exactly balanced, you would be on the heart line. Now, the heart line does not have things close to it, up grid or down grid. Those have other words. We've got upper power and lower power. We don't say that's a heartline experience. And so while flow could involve something other than a perfect balance, the heartline involves only the perfect balance. You can be above it, you can be below it, but if you want to be on the heartline, you've got to be on the heartline. In our lingo, in our anatomy of the change grid, if you will. So that's what we're saying, that ultimate flow would also be along its version of a heartline, but they do give you that broader definition of what flow could be. Now, we would then say, hey, if they're saying that there's this margin above and below that line that still represents flow, then we might say that as long as you are in the power response state, you can be experiencing a good degree of flow, some degree of flow. Would you guys agree with that, just based on the overlay?
Yes.
Yep. So there's a certain amount of area above the heart line where we still are getting great stuff done. And there's a certain amount down grid, but the same thing's happening. Great stuff is getting done. Doesn't necessarily have to be that, but you're not. The other difference is obviously we consider the heart line as starting at the origin, not at the center. So although coordinates 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3 are on the heart line, that experience of the heart line, or that experience of flow, is not identical to the one you would find in the middle of things or out here. It changes as we move further and further out grid. The experience of being on the heart line is also going to change. And we'll talk about in a little deeper review in what way it changes, but we already said it's higher levels of quantity. Again, if we use water as our metaphor, it's more water, it's moving more quickly, and it's moving with perhaps a lot more intensity, could even be getting quite turbulent at a certain point in time. So that's our thing. The hard line can happen anywhere that there's a balance between the perceptions of challenge and ability. All right, so now, the reason why I think it's important for us to take a look at the heart line is because the heart line is just a starting point for a discussion about how life actually happens. Is it true that every time you're on the heart line, you are actively doing something that needs to be done? Is it true that whenever you're on the heart line, stuff is happening and it's all good? Or would you guys say, well, think of the heart line as being more the potential for stuff getting done because everything's in the right place. There's a balance of challenge and ability. Flow is there waiting, but for whatever reason, the switch has not been turned. Are you guys with me on this, or not so much? Where tell me.
Yes.
Yep,
Yes.
yep, the latter makes more sense, yeah.
We're going to have to wrap our head around this idea that we know that that stuff happens when you're at the threshold of activation. Is it possible for someone to be on the heart line about a particular activity and still not be getting it done? So I'm going to say to you guys, can you step into the confessional, or can you look over your client list, or both, and say, no, there's plenty of times when I've got great ability to meet whatever challenge it is that is out there, but for whatever reasons, I'm not doing anything about it. I mean, I can have a whole world of potential and even fully acknowledge that I've got all this potential, that I could change the world. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's happening just because I have a perceived ability and a perceived challenge that match. You guys agree with me on that? Or
Yes.
Yes.
so what's missing? What's the deciding factor? And that's where we get the idea about, you get to have, anybody throw it out?
What's the choice? It's the willingness to act.
The choice, yeah, it's the willingness to act. Yep. So somewhere along the line, we have to say, in order for potential to become action, we have to have enough something to make that occur. What's that something?
Tension.
Tension.
Yeah.
All right, so just 1 second. Yeah. Kathy, I needed to meet your line. We were getting a little bit of feedback. Yeah. So just because we're on the heart line does not mean we have enough tension in order to get whatever it is done that needs to be done. Now, there's this is where we come into the discussion about the threshold of activation. The threshold of activation is the level of tension at which someone will take immediate definitive action on whatever that activity happens to be. We've always said that the default location of the threshold of activation sits between power stress and stress. That is not necessarily the case. The actual location of the threshold varies by the individual, by the activity, and by the moment in time. And so give me ideal situations, and I may very well, on a particular activity, and I may very well be ready to do it, but I might kind of go like, nah, I know that I can do it. I know it needs to be done, but I don't find my current situation troublesome enough to bother doing anything definitive to change that yet. Going back to what Kathy said, it's all about, have you made the choice? You know, is this something that you have actually decided to do? Is that going to happen? And again, I believe that my life is filled with plenty of examples of times when I had even declared an intention. I know exactly what I was going to do. I had everything necessary to do it. It was plenty challenging to be interesting, but I didn't take the action to do it. I did not have enough tension to take that action. I wasn't at my threshold of activation.
So T, there are two ways to increase tension. Well, there are many ways to increase tension, but if, raising the challenge or lowering the ability would seem to be kind of a negative approach, or an adversarial approach with an individual.
Yep.
So how do we get that tension? We just focus on the challenge?
Well, we can focus on the challenge in the moment if we're trying to move somebody so that they're having that flow experience. And I know I'm talking about a lot of inside out things, but I promise you, it'll all come together by the time we're done. If I want someone to have a flow experience, it is not enough for them to simply be in a place of balance in their perceptions. They must be there while their threshold is there too. So let's take a look at that. In the perfect world, once you had made a decision that something needed to be done, you knew you had everything you needed to meet that challenge. Should you delay taking action? Should you delay implementing until something comes along and raises your level of tension? Or should you just go, I made my decision, let's do it?
You could delegate.
I could delegate. Now we'll talk about threshold delegation in just a second, but let's say this is something that I'm going to end up doing. When we're in the training for change works, I say this when we get to this slide, that the degree to which your threshold of activation deviates from the heart line tells me the degree to which something is interfering with your life. Does anyone remember what that is that's interfering with someone's life? The distance between, or the gap between, the heart line and your threshold of activation for whatever that activity happens to be, wherever that threshold happens to fall, represents something. So you guys tell me, if you're ready to do it all right here in the green line, what does it cost you to wait for something to raise your tension?
Or could be success.
Could be success altogether. What else is it costing me?
Resources.
Resource, costing me time, whatever. So what we say is that if I want to be able to get as much done as easily as I can, how close should your threshold be to your heart line? If you want to be as efficient, productive, effective as possible, where does your threshold need to be? And the answer is it needs to be on the heart line. All right, soak in that for just a second. If you're working with a client and the client says, we have everything we absolutely need to take care of this issue, and we have, it's plenty challenging, so we know it needs to be done. We know it's going to be a test. We've got everything we need right now to go out there and slay that dragon, to go out there and meet that challenge. How many of you have clients who hesitate to follow through?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you all relate to that?
Yes.
Why are they hesitating to follow through? Why are they delaying taking action? Why? Anyone remember from your training? Okay. The degree to which the thresholds deviate from the heart line represent the degree to which dysfunction has impacted your decision-making and action taking. So it's dysfunction. If you are going to be waiting for something external to drive you to it, and maybe you've heard your clients say, well, you know, we got other things we're focusing on right now, or things are okay for now, but yeah, we know we need to do it. We absolutely know it's got to be done. We know all that's happening and we got the ability to do it, but we're going to wait. We're going to see what happens. We're going to let other priorities. We are waiting for the situation to change. And again, I have to remind you that definitive change only occurs 2 places on the change grid. Do either of you guys remember where definitive change occurs on the change grid? There's 2 places where change occurs. Where are those 2 places? Well, I'm glad we're doing this review.
Out grid and up grid.
And up grid. So now, what's the difference between up grid and out grid changes? So, yep, go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, no, up grid is the change is happening to you,
right,
as opposed to out grid change. You are activating. It's coming from you as opposed to
right.
you. So
Exactly.
that's why the perfect world, threshold is aligned because your will and your engagement and your heart is in it. So that's
Right. Right. And so you've just said, once I become the person who is more outgrid, I'm being driven by internal factors, choice and desire, intention, all those good sorts of things. Then I don't need to be waiting for external factors to impose themselves on my reality that pretty much is forcing me to go ahead and do it. That's, as you've already said, that squanders resources. Plus it dangles over your head. It's kind of like, oh, I know it's coming. I'm dreading it, but I know it's coming, blah, 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 because I really haven't chosen to do it. Is that fair to say? Or, it's something that's on my plate, but I didn't necessarily put it there or want it there. So there's stuff going on. Now, to David's point earlier, if I want to help somebody to become more productive, I have two choices. I can either spend my time being that external factor that is raising their level of tension until they hit their threshold and do whatever needs to be done, or I could help them retrain their threshold so that it sits on top of the heart line. So that could either be just about helping people to recognize when they are delaying it. You can call it procrastination, but whatever it is, there's lots of things beyond procrastination. My problem with procrastination is a value judgment. There are legitimate reasons why we might also delay taking action. It doesn't necessarily mean procrastination, but there are factors that are involved. Can I learn how to recognize those factors and manage those factors more effectively? If I'm just using them as creative avoidance, can I recognize that and consciously dismiss it? There are things that we can do, particularly as change management experts, to help people retrain their thresholds.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Absolutely. In fact, procrastination, the research often isn't about, shows that it's not about laziness as it is overwhelm. So if someone is overwhelmed, they can learn to, subtractive changes and
Yep.
what that looks like.
Yep. But if we don't do something to help people retrain their thresholds, what's happening is that nature, the world we live in as it is right now, in terms of technology, et cetera, are basically training our thresholds to go higher and higher,
Mm-hmm.
not lower and lower. And so the amount of tension that we used to need in order to do whatever may have become so comfortable to us now that we need that amount of tension plus a higher dose before we find the situation troublesome enough to bother doing anything definitive to change it. I'll give you an
Wow.
example of this, particularly for those of you who are parents. I'm sure you can relate to this. I'm not a parent, but I've had enough nephews and nieces to know this part of the scope. So, when you first had your first child and you heard the baby cry, how many of you, comparatively speaking, immediately went to check on whatever's going on with the child? But after the course of weeks, months with that child, you start to learn what certain cries meant or didn't mean. So you knew more about what to pay attention to and what to ignore.
Mm-hmm.
Now add to that, you had multiple children. So after you had the second kid and the third kid, how soon did you reach a point where you just kind of went like, cry? For now, I'm going to ignore it because it might just go away on its own. They might just be trying to soothe themselves, amuse themselves, whatever. I don't know. All I know is that that is not a cry of distress. So I'm going to wait until the crying gets different somehow, probably more likely than not, you're looking for a difference in the crying, but that it goes on too long, or it's too loud, or you can tell the kid's getting exhausted before you would intervene. What's basically
Mhm.
happened is that you have been conditioned to
Mhm.
tolerate increasing levels of, in that particular case, crying before you found that situation troublesome enough to bother doing anything definitive to change it.
Mhm.
Has that been your experience?
Yes.
Ready? Yep, yep, yep. Now, that same phenomenon plays itself out in all aspects of life. So if you think about social media, we are being bombarded by social media in all of its many forms. And by the way, add to that mainstream media as well, although I'm starting to wonder if social media is actually now the real mainstream media, and old-fashioned media is, feeling a little vintage. So, but nevertheless, it's still all there, and we are being bombarded with messages about every single subject all day long. And of course, we know that all advertisers, all promoters, so I don't care if it's social media or not, if you're a social media influencer or you are some sort of a social media, I don't know, personality on whatever subject that you've got, or you're a news station or whatever, I know that the vast majority of those people are trying to monetize that. They're
Mhm.
trying to make money. They're trying to sell advertising so that they can get the exposures that the advertiser wants you to get in order for them to get whatever compensation is heading their way. So they pay very close attention to what moves you up grid. And that's what they're going to focus on: upgrade, upgrade, upgrade. So good news is often relegated to a little column on some stray page. Good news very rarely gets the headline unless you're, what was that sports team that had never won super playoff thingamajabba-dabba-doo, but finally did? I get it. Was that, I don't remember. I'm not a sports guy, but I know that somebody who was not supposed to win really, really won, and it was that. So I get it. Stuff like, anybody know what that is, or am I talking to my peers here about sports fascination?
No, I love sports, but I don't know which one you're
It was
talking
either the
about.
White Sox won and they weren't supposed to win, or it was the Chicago whatever. I don't remember. That's not my world. All I know is that whatever happened was so exciting and so unexpected.
Are you talking about Field of Dreams?
Well, no, that's a movie around it for sure, but I thought this.
No, but that's the gig, right? That's the Cubs or
Yep.
the White Sox.
Yep. Exactly right. Okay. So that to me is what I'm saying. Like, maybe something like that will get your attention, but even if it does, I think they're going to want to try to sell you souvenirs or whatever they can. Point is
Mhm.
that they learn very quickly, and the media learns very quickly. Social media influencers learn very quickly that in order to continue to pull the views, the visits, the whatever out of the followers, we have to continuously increase the level of tension. So
Mhm.
that's why you guys, if you've not really studied YouTube very much, you may not recognize this, but the most powerful factor in influencing someone to watch your video is one thing. Does anyone know what the one thing is that will make or break the chances of your video actually being watched? It doesn't matter if these are your followers, but to get your followers to actually watch a video, something is absolutely critical. Do you guys know what that thing is?
Is it the thumbnail, the
The
headline?
thumbnail. So in the old days of newspapers, it would be the headline and the subheadings. Nope, it's that thumbnail. You got that tiny amount of space to somehow or another capture their attention and be provocative enough that they will click on it and watch it. Attention management inside of a video is a science all into itself, but nevertheless, we got to be able to do that. So I have to keep coming up with increasingly clever ways of capturing someone's attention, putting the message out there. The message has to become increasingly, well, it has to awaken and upgrade emotion. It has to either boost your lust, your desire in a big way. It has to really trigger your fear, remember, anger, grief, fear, and shame. So I've got to do something that's going to awaken one of those emotions in order for you to actually take action. Can you guys all relate to this?
Yeah, that's why I keep saying attention is our greatest capital asset, because everyone is out to get it.
That's right. We need to be able, when we're talking about managing our attention, we're talking about managing our attention. People pay attention to where they find their tension. If I can help people to shut off a lot of this upgrade maneuver sort of stuff that's happening to them throughout their daily life, they may be able to relax a little bit. Or if I work with them to, ask certain questions so they aren't so susceptible to the manipulation of others, advertisers, newscasters, etc., then maybe, just maybe over time, that's it. Now, I'll tell you, the advertising world is terrified of the perfect situation. Absolutely terrified of it, because that would mean that all of your decisions are made by logic ruling the day, and you are doing something because it makes sense. People don't spend very much money in those situations. Things are more thoughtful. People are being more prudent, a little bit more careful, because you're not being pulled into the moment. You're not being sucked into the excitement or subjected to the threat that something is going to vanish because you have to act now because the offer expires soon. So this is what the world creates in order for the world to pull the dollars out of, ultimately it's out of our own pockets, but it's being moved through the advertising or whatever.
It's getting worse. And I know Kathy talked about this before on our call, where we talked about losing that capacity to actually spend time reflecting, right? And so I think that's becoming even worse, where, the algorithms and every decision making is outsourced to more and more technology. So people don't have time to actually think about that. And
That's
so
right.
they're just unaware.
That's right. That's right. Now, apply this back to flow for a second. We would say, hey, flow, while it is true that in order for you to be in flow, you have to have a balance, a relative balance of perceptions between challenge and skill in the case of their dimensions. While that is also true, when you get into their description of the characteristics of flow, it also says that it is a goal that you have, and it is something that you enjoy. You're doing something you enjoy. It's a goal that you have. And so that sounds a little bit more intentional and a little bit more, internally driven than being manipulated by external factors. The thing is that for those things to be present, so for that feeling of, having something you really enjoy doing and actually doing it, you have to be on the heart line. So what does that really tell us about people who want to be in a flow state? We have to not only help them find a challenge that meets their ability, we have to find a challenge that also is something that doesn't require delays while you're waiting for something external. We have to turn the externally driven person to be more internally driven, to become more thoughtful, more prudent, more conscientious, more whatever. We have to train this to get back to where it belongs. Otherwise, the chance of you experiencing flow is going to be greatly reduced to a smaller set of activities, because we all have certain things that we love doing, and if we could carve out some time, we just go ahead and do it. So that's all great, but things get in the way. So we want to be able to say to our clients, we can help you achieve a flow state on a much broader range of activities, and ultimately experience greater joy in your life because you're minimizing all of the negative energy and negative emotion that is being fed to you all day, every day.
Mhm.
All right. Are you guys all with me? I mean, I know I'm talking a lot.
Yes. No, it sounds like it's the more I dig up research on this in terms of sports medicine, what they call the zone, it sounds like this is exactly it. It's like there's an alignment, there's a harnessing, or at least position to harness momentum.
Right.
And when they do that, therein is their best opportunity, as you articulated, to experience that zone moment or that flow moment.
Yep. It's interesting that you're calling it the zone from sports, because I wonder if one of the models that we've integrated into the change grid was proposed by Robert and Marilyn Harris Krieger or Kriegel. I don't remember, Krieger and Kriegel. They wrote a book called The C Zone: Peak Performance Under Pressure. And pretty much they're describing what they call, the C zone, and the C zone would be right here on the heart line. The C zone represents flow, peak performance under pressure. So there's enough challenge there, but you can actually get it all done. This is what happening. And they would say that as you move further and further, they don't know upgrade, but if the ratio changes, you're going, and by the way, for them, it's perceived difficulty versus perceived skill. They would say you're in the panic zone, I think is what they called it. And so it's too much. It's too much. We might call it, we know it's stress and power stress, but they would call this the panic zone. And down at the bottom, if things are too low, you're down in the drone zone. So they were saying to athletic performers, if you overestimate your ability and underestimate the challenge, you're going to end up in the drone zone. And that might still serve you well if you're up against a competitor who has nowhere near your ability and is all stressed out to meet the challenge. This is going to affect your behavior, your responses. And similarly, if you think you're up against someone who's threatens you in some way, that being thrown off, you're being moved out of that zone, is going to in fact impact your performance. And obviously that in turn affects your outcome. So yep. So lots of things that resonate on that. But I just thought this was an interesting thing to bring into the mix, because inside of flow psychology, there is no acknowledgement of this idea about the threshold of activation. That is something that seems to be rather unique to what the work we do, and perhaps one of the historical models dating way back. And we can dig for it if you guys want me to, but nevertheless, this is not something that is frequently encountered. We know it has to be there. So I think, again, if we go back to the characteristics, it's great that Flow says that you need it to be something that you actually want to do and a goal that you really care about. But how often are we being asked by clients to help boost performance among their team members, regardless of whether those team members truly enjoy the work or truly want to do it? There's an agreement in place. You pay me and I'll do work for you. Well, not all that work that you want me to do is stuff that's on my natural flow potential list. Can you guys think of that?
Yeah, that's why I like this discussion about the conditioning, because I remember when I was on a startup team and we were designing HR software, the research showed from Burston and Associates, that's all they study is on the HR space, and the research showed that less than 4% of major corporations actually know how to model or even design for performance. Although they say, yeah, we want high performing teams, we want higher engagement. And so, they don't really model it. They don't know how to do that in terms of conditioning and designing a workspace, an environment for that kind of conditioning to actually happen, not just as a one-off experience, but a continuum.
Yep.
And that's a very interesting thing, because that's the number one thing most organizations want and they complain about, is we don't have enough productivity, engagement is down. Well, it always starts, number one, on a personal level. And
Mhm.
then you have to incorporate that, on the basis of and take that interpersonal and project it outwardly to working on a team and working in groups and being specialized. And no one really models it. It's just a fascinating thing.
Well, and this is why I have always felt, and I continue to feel the truth in the statement that the science of tension management, if I can even call it that, the science of tension management is vitally important to people's lives. And if they don't understand that there is this idea about tension that's in play, they're going to think that just by putting people into situations where challenge meets ability, I'm going to end up with flow.
Mhm.
And they're missing this big element. So I think the demand for our services is only going to increase as the world becomes increasingly dysfunctional as a result of the nonstop manipulation we're all being exposed to.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's what I really think. Your guys' greatest skills you bring is tension management. You know how to lower this threshold. You know how to raise tension. That's really, really great. But raising tension produces a result in the moment. I want a lasting improvement in the person's life. And that lasting improvement is really going to be more about retraining the thresholds than it is about just raising or lowering someone's level of productive tension, as the case may be. Yep.
I think this is a really important point, and I want probably one of the most powerful things about the change grid,
Mhm.
and because these are kinds of subtle concepts in their own way,
Mhm.
and very clearly defined here in this very clear to me in this diagram. For people who know what the change grid is about, it's very clear. But that concept of flow and productivity and energizing and helping people get back into work and the love of work is
Mhm.
is a mystery right now to
Right.
many people. And I think that this is an incredible contribution that this work can make.
Well, I think it's something that if people would just understand, like, how do I put it? Okay, the levels of tension are in pretty much fixed positions. So stress, power, being apathy, and they're just 5 stopping points along a whole continuum. But pretty much, we're looking at something that's pretty fixed in place, and that heart line, by definition, is fixed in place. But tension management is all about managing these 2 thresholds. And I think that that's what people are missing and what we need to really bring to their awareness. And like in the work that I do with Positively Living, I just say, look, the reason why you need to focus on cultivating positivity and carving some time out for positive thoughts and positive interactions to happen, to be exercised, is because you're being bombarded. And we've got to do something to kind of retrain it. So we've got to do this. Now, we've been talking about the amount of tension that it takes to get someone to take action. Well, there is a specific action that people may need to take that has its own threshold. So let's just to finish this discussion off, let's take a look at the threshold of delegation. Now, the threshold of delegation is the level of tension at which someone willingly relinquishes control. Soak in that for just a second. The level of tension at which someone willingly relinquishes control. So if you think about your clients right now, in all likelihood, you've got plenty of clients who spent some time in power, figured out exactly what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, put together procedure manuals, blah, blah, blah. But they have failed to delegate what needs, they're still hanging on to stuff. How many of you deal with generational companies? And the parents who are currently owning and operating the place aren't getting the successive generation to, or the successor generation involved enough soon enough. Anybody relate to that? Somebody, yeah, yeah. No? All right, well, it happens.
Yes, absolutely. It's
Yeah,
very
yeah.
common and particularly in family-owned businesses.
Right. We're hanging on to something too long. Even if we look at our own lives, we can go like, there are things that I could have, should have, would have delegated long ago, needed to have delegated long ago, but I'm still okay with it. I'll give you an example. This in the backyard project. I am 65 years old. Yeah, I take my workouts very seriously and all that. So I get it. I'm in really good shape for my age in particular, but should I really be shoveling, how about if I said 10 cubic yards of stone in and out of a wheelbarrow and rolling it around? I mean, is that really a smart thing for a guy like me to be doing? Or should I have delegated that to any one of the dozens of people who stop by our neighborhood every week asking if we've got any yard work we need them to do? You know what I'm saying? It's like, how many of you find yourself hanging on to something that you really could and should have delegated to somebody else?
Mhm.
Anybody, or is it just me? No.
No,
That's
you're
very
right.
real.
It's very, very real. And there's an interesting dynamic with this. There's a totally different issue, obviously, happening downgrade than upgrade. But in the downgrade kind of thing, some of the reasons why we hang on to something. In fact, let me throw it to you as a question. Why would someone who could and should delegate something hang on to it?
This is perfect for someone like me who revels in my ability to get things done,
Mhm.
and I'm getting to the point where I physically just cannot do a lot of things anymore that I used to do 5 years ago,
Sure.
and it's all about identity.
Yeah.
Very good. When you define yourself, at least in part, based on the kinds of things that you can do with relative ease, it's kind of a shame to give those up, because now no one's going to see you do that task with relative ease. And so you lose a lot of, I want to say, a control over whatever's going on, because of course, we hear these kinds of statements all the time. It would take me longer to explain to somebody else how to do this than it would for me to just do it and get it over with. So I'll take care of it. Or we go like, well, I don't know that I'm comfortable delegating it to other people, because how can I be sure it's going to be done correctly? Or, I got to keep my eye on it. I got to whatever. We're not trying to turn into a developmental experience. So there's a progression of delegation, just as people learn and can prove themselves as more than capable of doing, pardon me, the task is. Or maybe it's also goes back to that, as Kathy was saying, the ownership kind of thing. If you're in a family-owned business, in all likelihood, the family members who started it had some passion around it. So they wanted to start something. They wanted to make it happen. Well, if it's a generational business, is it necessarily true that the kids that are going to inherit the leadership roles and the ownership of the company share the passion? Is it their mission? No. And then now make it 2 generations later, whatever it happens to be. We have to assume that there are going to be people involved who are not as jazzed about what grandma and grandpa decided to start. And so maybe grandma and grandpa or mom and dad are hesitant to let go because the kids don't, it's not that they can't do the work. They may very well have the education, the technical ability to do it, but they lack the vision, the mission, the purpose, that connection to it at the emotional level. And so they're hesitant to let go because they don't want their life's work to fizzle, because someone else doesn't care as much about it as they do. I'm feeling a little bit of a look in the mirror right now, because when I think like, okay, I know that in the next 10 years, my primary professional goal is to make sure that all this intellectual property that we've developed and played with over all these many years is captured into a form that other people can find online for the rest of forever. So, I don't want, I think my life's work has got enough merit that it deserves to endure. So I'm not, I don't want to be grandiose about the whole thing, but I believe that's kind of an accurate statement. So how are they going to do that? You can write the book, but people don't do books anymore. And it'd be a really tedious book to write and a horribly tedious book to read if I took those 300 hours of intellectual property and just wrote it all down. I got to make something more engaging. It's got to be shorter bits in videos and whatever. So I'll be very busy with whatever's going on, because my big fear is that if I just said, anybody want this? Here's a gift. I'll give you full legal rights to all of the intellectual property. I'll give you all my stuff. I may very well have plenty of people who would say, I'll do that. Sometimes I've also often wondered if I should find a way to say, hey, people that are in your 20s and 30s, if you'd like to have a career as a speaker, a trainer, a coach, a consultant that's going to support you in comfort for the rest of your life, I got some intellectual property I'll let you have. I think there's going to be a lot of people go like, yeah, give it to me, whatever's going on. I am hesitant to delegate that. So, and part of the reason is because I'm not sure they get it. It's not just about this content and these insights and these techniques or whatever. It's just consider all that to be a starting point of a thought process that will continually evolve for generations to come. But underlying all those thoughts are still going to be these basic principles about tension management. So I don't want it to get locked into, you learn this technique, you learn this procedure, and you're done. No, I got to make sure people that like to think and will think about and will continue to let the merging happen and all that they resonate with it. So now, is that just a bunch of excuses for why I'm not delegating it? Or do you guys think that I've put forth at least a little bit of legitimate concern?
No, I will be concerned about that, quite frankly.
Yeah, because we don't want to delegate prematurely. That's a problem all of its own. Don't delegate too much, too soon, too fast. We'll end up with a real problem that has to be paid for later on. So, but all that said, if I wanted to live the most productive life I possibly could, once I have decided on the Heartline, I made the decision that X could be delegated. It could be delegated to this person. It could be delegated in this way. Once all those things are in place, when should I delegate it? Sooner or later?
Oh, with all those in place soon.
Soon, because the degree to which I delay that delegation represents, potentially represents dysfunctional thinking, dysfunctional decision-making. I mean, if the truth is I haven't found this person yet, or the truth is it isn't in a form that I could hand to somebody, if all that still needs to be done, well, the truth is it's too soon to delegate it. But if all that stuff is in place and you're still going like, but I'm going to hang on to it a little longer, a little longer, a little longer, a little longer, I could die and never have delegated to anybody, in which case what happens to all my life's work?
Yeah, now it loses its value.
Exactly, or it vanishes.
Yeah.
I believe that for every amazing thing you learn on the internet or you've learned in college, whatever, there has to be a dozen things that fell by the wayside, fell into the crevices of antiquity that were just as amazing and just as whatever, but you got lost because nobody wrote down what you were saying or nobody decided to continue to share the stories. And so all that vanished. If you don't want something to vanish. So this becomes a real issue. When do you delegate? How do you delegate? How quickly do you delegate? All that being said,
with your definition, that definition of delegation, you can be in a situation that force you to delegate. Like I'm thinking patients, right? Like I worked with orthopedic surgeons before medical school, and I remember that the athletes will come in, they're conditioned to play with pain, so they're okay with it. But then, in the off season, like they'll try to do the same thing, and it just gets to a point where they have no other recourse but to get to the doctor,
Right.
because now the torn cartilage or something like that is so bad that you can't walk anymore.
Right. Absolutely right. Right. Yep. And so this becomes the real question. I love it. Shannon, you can feel free to unmute and share, Shannon. So tell us about your kryptonite.
That's awesome.
Yeah, delegation has definitely been my kryptonite because, I, of course, I go through all the thoughts around about some similar to what you've already shared. It's like, well, but if this is my area of expertise and I delegate it to somebody else, it's not going to get done as well or completely or efficiently or effectively or whatever
My
as
way, right?
exactly as if I did it. And so I think that's probably the biggest thought process that trips me up.
Mhm.
Is I think my one on the Enneagram triangle point of the perfectionism
Yeah.
gets in my way.
In fact, I was going to say that I believe that that perfectionistic tendencies and hesitation to delegate go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
How can I delegate when it's not perfect yet?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Well, I mean, it's premature to delegate the whole thing, and how can I delegate to anybody until I find the perfect somebody?
Exactly.
Delegate.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, I'm the perfect somebody, and there's one of me. So, you know, I don't know how I'm going to be able to find my clone wandering around out there. And that's why you go, like, if I could reduce my perfectionistic tendencies, I'd be saying, like, I'm not looking for another me. I'm looking for somebody who's got some of the qualities I think are important, like the ability. My big fear, I'll just tell, because with those of you that are remaining on the call, I don't mind telling you that I think there are a lot of people out there who would love to be in our line of work, but unless somebody gives them the exact map that needs to follow, that if it can't be reduced to a procedure, if it requires independent thinking and evolving principles and all that, they can't do it. There are plenty of people out there that simply don't have the ability to go beyond what came in the box.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, that's not development.
Right.
I mean, I'm glad you know the box, but the box is the starting point. It's not the ending point. So yeah. So you got to kind of wonder, I want someone who goes, oh, that stimulates this thought in my head, or oh, that makes me wonder now about blah, blah, blah. I want them to play with it and find ways to expand upon it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now, so if we go like, well, what does this represent, though, going back to flow, since that's the topic we'd like to finish in the next 3 minutes, is I believe the things that occur between your heartline experience of them, or your true flow experience of them, and your willingness to delegate them. By the way, we might delegate it to another person, but in this era of technology, we can often delegate things to things like video. I could delegate this to something that's in an online library, to a database. I mean, I don't necessarily have to delegate it to a person. I've got other options, but I got to delegate it sooner or later. I got to let it go, let it go, let it go. So I think that this gap represents, and let's see if you guys will resonate with this, things that used to be flow experiences for me that are no longer flow. Can I do them? Yes. Can I do them well? Yes. Do they still have some challenge? Yeah, but my ability is greater. And so I'm the best one to do it. But at a certain point, I kind of lose my enthusiasm for it. So, you know what I mean? So at one point in time, it was flow for me. And the thought that I'm ever going to be back in flow about it is highly debatable. But
Interesting.
these are where my former flow things may still be a bit active. Now, if you're down in apathy, I would say these could also be flow experiences. Chris, you've unmuted. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what hit me while you were saying that was the difference between flow as a state versus flow as an activity. So I don't know if I confused something that you mentioned, because it kind of just felt like if you could get tired of it or you're just not enthused about it, maybe that's more of an activity versus
Yeah.
flow is a state that you enter into
That's right.
that you're kind of like so
right.
detached from results, you're just kind of on automatic.
Yeah, and that's what I love that you pointed out. It's kind of like, because we know that at a certain point in time, I don't care how flowy that activity felt, there will come a time that unless that challenge continues to go up and you continue to learn more to meet those challenges, you are going to leave the flow state and still be something. So these were former flow experiences that are now just, what I'm going to say, skills you've developed. I don't want to distract from them. These are strengths. These are things you've learned. This is good stuff. But it doesn't mean it gets you excited anymore. It doesn't mean you jump out of bed going, oh, I want to balance the checkbook today.
Right.
Well, all because there was a period of time when you would actually sit down to balance checkbooks and go like, this is going to be a fun puzzle. And you just get lost in searching for that 2-cent deviation discrepancy. Like 2 cents is going to matter. Yeah, anyway, you get the
So would
idea.
you say it's out of alignment?
You're out of alignment, you're out of balance.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think what I'm trying to do is say, we have to allow for the possibility. And maybe we even want to say, we want to encourage the possibility that people don't get stuck in a certain flow state, a certain activity, and that's the only place they find flow. You know, it's kind of like you want to go, yeah, but we want you to continually increase that perceived challenge. We want you to continually grow as far as your ability, because you're going to fall out of flow. You're just going to fall out of flow.
Yeah.
And
it's not meant for you to experience forever and ever. No
yeah, it
feeling
wasn't a
is.
destination. It's not a
Right.
destination.
You know, T, I was thinking about Tiger Woods, especially in his prime, about how he kept changing his swing. So it wasn't a question of how he can get into a flow state. He had to increase the challenge because he saw that there was more opportunity. So getting into the flow in the process of your swing and the vision, all that stuff to get into flow state is one thing, but increasing the degree of difficulty, which is what kept him excited, enthused, and seeking for it.
Right, moved him slightly up grid,
Right.
slightly out of flow. Let's just say the water got a little bumpy. And, you know, then he figured that one out, figured out how to do it. I saw an interview with him. I'm not a golf, I live in a golf course, but I don't, it's just because it's green. I'm not a golfer, not a golfer. I just don't understand the number of hours to knocking a small ball into an even smaller hole. But nevertheless, people do, they seem to love it. I went off on my little tangent about golf. Why did I do that? Where was I heading?
Interview.
Interview.
Yeah, you said you saw an interview of
of Tiger Wood. Thank you. And what really engaged me and fascinated me was him learning how to bounce the golf ball on the side of his putter. Have you seen him do that? How he can like do all these crazy tricks. He can spin it around. He can do it behind his back. It's like this guy could have a circus act. That's nothing but juggling a golf ball on top of a golf club. So I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? I wonder if he did that as another way to boost the challenge. You know, had to come up with the ability to do that because he seems to be able to do it for prolonged periods of time. So yeah, there you go. All righty. So I think with that, our little final comment is that ultimately in our skill set as human development professionals, we need to know how to raise and lower someone's level of tension. Make no mistake about that. There's plenty of times when that's exactly what we need to do. But we also have to think about helping that person to develop. And if we really want to focus on development, we need to think about retraining their thresholds of activation and thresholds of delegation at the activity specific level. So when we're noticing them delaying taking action or letting go, we have to be able to say right then and there, tell me what this delay is all about. You know, let's get her done, get her done. And then talk about flow. If we are in a place of great balance and we're immediately taking action to do those things that need to be done or to delegate those things that need to be delegated, how much are we going to get done?
Mhm.
And now maybe we could talk about flow not as an activity specific state, but flow as a state of being on a given day. You know, if you could just be in flow all day, as various activities change or whatever, it's not the activity that is so much in charge of flow, but it might be flow that's in charge of the activities.
That's
That
good.
would be something that we would be
Mhm.
working towards as human development professionals. Okay,
Wow.
so with that, I guess we're done with the topic of flow and we're done for today. So I'll come up with something that I think you guys might find interesting starting next time. And yeah, I'll send you a little alert to know what that's going to be. So I got something in mind, but I got to refine it. Okay, any final thoughts, comments?
This is really good.
All right.
Yeah, this is really great, exciting.
All right.
Thank you.
Apply it to your own life today. Ask yourself, am I waiting for something to prompt me to take action? Am I hanging on to something I should let go of? I mean, tension managers should be able to manage their own level of tension too. So how far do your thresholds deviate from that heart line? Okay, give that some thought. Talk to you again soon. Bye for now, everybody.
Bye.
All right.
Bye, everybody.